So this is the new thing on YouTube. I'm gonna try to figure out exactly how it all works. See if I'm streaming from the other, like when I'm on like YouTube. See if it picks it up, and I'm gonna see if I can't share the screen and all that. But if I can't, then it'll just be what it is. Give me 1 moment to see what all of these things are. Let's look at link. All right, so I don't think you can actually share from this. I'm gonna have to figure out how to. I had bought like some data a long time ago from like the streaming services, but I'm gonna have to wait till my money comes right. Now I might see how the stream goes on YouTube or whatever, but I'm seeing what the limitations are right now. I think they purposely made it to where you can't share your screen, so therefore the sharing of information is more difficult. Um, but we're going to see what's going on the YouTube right now, and it doesn't matter because I can still read the article to you. It's the same thing. It's just night. You just have to look at me the whole time. Um, Let me see, because I can't really tell if it's gonna do what the other ones will do or what. But we're gonna see. Excuse me. Yes. Let's see. Okay, it does do that. Now let's see what happens. Pause it. Probably that goes. Yep. But and then let's see what happens if it's okay. Bam, it's the same thing. So it's a little bit faster. The feed is a little bit better. Uh, my camera's still garbage, so I guess it's all good. Uh, what else? Like, I think that'll be the only thing I'm trying to figure out is trying to figure out if there's a way to share the screen. If there's at all a possibility of doing that. They give you a couple of little like you have a couple little options on the screen. You know, maximize it. I just want to see everything because this is what's going to be used going forward, or at least what's most accessible, unless guys are streaming. But even then, if they're streaming, it doesn't really matter. But I just had to. Tomorrow's August 1st, so I'm going through the motions right now, and I'm doing this for a whole lot of people other than myself. But we're going to start with the article at WeBuyBlack.com, and very interesting. You know, they have a event coming here in I want to say August. I forget where in Georgia, but there's been a brother named Sharif who's been staying in contact with me. You know, he doesn't have to, but so I don't know why, but he got my email and I emailed him back, and this is the story I'm reading. This man opened a grocery store in a food desert. Now I just want to go back to the fact that I don't know how many months ago, probably the start of this year, I did a little thing where I was talking about how um, the dollar stores had pretty much taken over um, all all basic neighborhoods, and why that was so important, why that was so crucial was because they had left they had left places. Washington D.C. is the first one that comes to mind when the word food desert comes to mind. That's the first place I know that it was used um, in all the articles that I read, and 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 this is funny because it says this man opened a grocery store in a food desert. Now it's called Cleo's Bodega Grocery, and I can't see the other little part word. But Brendan Cosby isn't interested in what is, he only sees what should and can be. He is the executive director of Flatter House in Indianapolis, an organization originally designed by Booker T. Washington to lift blacks in Indianapolis from slum conditions. Flatter House has a variety of programs that support families in the area, but also runs the largest urban farm in the city. After the last grocer in the community folded, residents began organizing for a new one. When they asked for healthy foods and fresh produce in a community meeting, they were told beggars can't be choosers. Cosby immediately threw the man out of the meeting and declared that they build the store themselves. I love it. It just opened last month. And I really wish that YouTube wasn't doing what it's going to do tomorrow, but we'll see if there's a way to actually share the screen. If not, I'm gonna have to get streaming capabilities and then something that obviously gives me the ability to share my screen. But if not, we'll just have to just deal with it like this, and I'll read to you. But the link. Let me take the link. Give me one moment. Let me copy it. Let me see if I can't just go right here to the actual spot. Please. Oh, it's far too big. Okay. So that's the problem with it. It exceeds the the limitation of letters that you can have in a message. Don't worry, I figured out I'll have to just send it to my closest conciliaires through their emails. However, Cosby has a track record of doing the impossible. Once upon a time, he was tapped to resurrect the worst and most violent high school in Indianapolis. In 180 school days, the students were engaged in 256 fights. After Cosby took over, with 70% of the original students still in place, they had just 5 fights in 4 years. The school became the only in the district with a wait list to get in. And the Indiana Bar Association recognized Cosby as Educator of the Year. When he took over, Flatter House, the organization, was in shambles and $500,000 in debt. It was so bad that he asked the board if he could start the very day he was hired. He thought it would only get worse if he left the office that afternoon. He did start that day and hasn't looked back. I love this guy. He's like, yeah, look, if I wait any longer, mess around, he won't be able to save it. And he's a portly brother, but obviously he's intelligent and he cares about his people. I love black people, man. And one second, some guys, obviously this isn't a quote, is you just sold basil for more than you can sell weed. Cleo's Bodega Grocery and Cafe sits in the Riverside neighborhood area of Indianapolis. The cafe offers complimentary Wi-Fi to customers, an assortment of drinks and snacks. Before it opened, there was no place locals could actually sit down to eat or work in the entire neighborhood. The bodega is a grocery with a the bodega is a grocery with a small square footage but high density of products. The store carries all locally sourced produce, about half of which is grown on the Flatter House farm. The farm is used to teach at-risk youngsters urban farming and how to negotiate contracts with local grocers and other destinations where produce is sold. After seeing Mr. Cosby negotiate a sale of basil to the store, one team was amazed the price was better than that of weed without the risk of jail time. Cosby had to raise over $1 million to open the store. Not an easy task. Even with funding, however, he delayed the build out an entire year to make sure it was right. Flatter House partnered with a black owned development company to do the build out when the time came. He said he wanted to be of such high quality that people came from affluent neighborhoods would walk in and ask, why don't we have this in our neighborhood? Still, the most expensive item currently sold there is $6, and that's not bad. People from the community also have the option of leaving a little behind when they shop. Just so those in need can also be serviced with dignity, even if they happen to be low on funds. I love it. Come on, man. That's what I'm talking about. We can do the impossible and supply our own needs. But we have to, according to Cosby, stop measuring our progress and succeed by what we see in our neighborhoods. What works in some communities may not work in ours today. Cosby believes we should instead focus on things we need and want and then figure out how to marry those things. Cleo's Bodega Grocery and Cafe is an example of just that. Okay, now I'm gonna, that's actually the better news. This isn't the good news. That's the better news. The good news will come here, in a second, because it's going to take a lot more of that right there to actually build people up. I've been talking about it a long time. There's other people who've talked about urban farming, but it truly, really is one of the few things that'll actually keep people sustained. Now, will the earth always be turnable to produce produce? Who knows? But while it still can, you should take advantage of it, and I understand that. Um, for people who aren't in those situations, it's just about staying employed and doing your best to stay employed. Uh, Making sure that you have a resume, and not just a resume that has all your accolades on it, but things that are relevant to whatever job that you're looking for. If you don't have any relevant work experience, when you do your cover letter, which you should do if you don't have any relevant work experience, to explain why it is that you actually, in fact, would be uh, formidable force within this entity or this job force, whatever have you. There's just too many different ways of going about it, but you have to really see it for what it is. You can't let it sneak up on you. So, saying that, I really just want to talk about how, I don't know, when this first happened, right? When I have to go and get on YouTube and actually look, when I first was pretty bent out of shape about how there were no there were no produce in these dollar stores, right? And obviously, this man has had this in the works for a long time, but it's just funny because I say about still, and I have to commend the man for doing it in a rough area, in a place that or where anywhere in the Midwest can be rough. Don't get it twisted. Just some places are more rough than others, and the places that are more rough than others call all the other places not as rough soft. It's like that. It's like that anywhere. East Coast, West Coast, South. It's like that everywhere. However, um, when you have the ability to grow your own food, and he's shown these young men, like, look, you're going to get, for the same weight per pound, right? Now, you have to realize he's seen a something like basil sell for what he thought was comparative to marijuana, better than. And the reason why this is because it's a lighter product. When it grows, obviously, just like all things, it has a season that it can grow in. So how much you're going to grow and harvest is all based on how much you think a person is going to actually buy off of you. Now, um, they're intelligent just for growing things that they know that black people cook with. Number one, I know they're growing onions, carrots, potatoes, as you guys seen the peppers. I know they're growing, all different, whatever different fruits can grow out of the ground, like strawberries. Maybe they have a vineyard and things like that. They might even have like a little. It's Indianapolis, so if it was flat ground, they may, or I'm not sure that they really produce too many apple trees, but they might have a couple there. You know, if they have something like that imported, then of course, and you create the conditions, it'll grow and it'll produce. But whatever fruits that actually bud off the tree naturally, they have. I just can't think of anything in Indiana right off the top of my head. Um, But that's beautiful. This is the better news for sure. This is the better news, uh, uh, or the good news. It depends on how you take it. But this is good and better news. Neither part of it is bad. It just depends on how you look at it and how it's going to affect your life. This is beautiful. Um, I was going all in one day. I remember. I don't know if you guys remember, but I was going all in. I was talking about how these guys don't build these. Where are the kitchens, right? And it's just so funny that this man's last name is Cosby because I'm like, where are the Cosby kitchens and this that? And it's ironic, more or less. Uh, I reach into my memory all the time when I can. Uh, of course, I called out all the different other famous black people that I could think of, but Cosby is one that comes to my mind for sure. Where I'm like, where is his kitchens at? Right, where are his places at that made? And here's a brother with the same name, but a whole totally different outlook as to how he can reach out and affect his people. And this is something that you have to be willing to do. You can't be afraid, to reach out and affect your people in a positive way. There has to be love there. You have to appreciate what it is that you bring to the people. You have to have something to give to the people. This is a fact. See, another reason why YouTube got rid of the streaming concept is so that way people couldn't hide themselves anymore unless you're going to stream from another place where in which you can, continue to not show your physical presence. It's a concept that they have to imbue and make sure it's righteous and proper. I love it. It's a funny thing. However, these black people have built, and this black man with the great minds around him have built a formidable force that should be acknowledged and appreciated in all ways, shapes, and forms. And I think, well, I don't think, I know that if other black people who, once again, are so quick to, and this is $1 million where he obviously he his square footage is probably greater than the square footage of somebody who could get something a little smaller, a little cheaper, and put in, let's say, from the resources of several individuals who all have that and can substantiate it all. You see what I'm saying? Um, it's nothing to get a business through multiple entities, okay, and make it a corporation to where in which the initial strength of the of this corporation is not weak. But however, in mind, just know that it was beautiful to see that I had spoke about it, right, and to know that there was somebody who was like, "Man, I'm already a couple steps ahead of you, young brother. I got that beat. I got that beat so much to where, laugh about it because it should be funny to you. You should feel good about it. You should not be bothered by it. And I took that, I take that all in heart because it's a blessing. Um, it really is. I like this format. The only thing I don't like better about it is the inability to obviously share all the things that I'm seeing with you. But outside of that, it's no different. It's no different than a person talking to you and saying the same things to you that they would say. And outside of that, the actual feedback is so much better and crisper. I think there's maybe like a 5 or 4 second delay as opposed to a 30-second delay. So I'm over that. I'm over the whole little breakdown of it all. But the let me pull this up real quick. Supreme Court. This is from 4 days ago. Supreme Court. 1 second. Is it OKs? Yeah. Freeze up 2.5 billion for border wall. Now, you gotta remember, one of the initial deals that they had made, fucking what, like a year ago, just about to keep the wall open. You know, it was like 8 months ago, 9 months ago. The little Democrat people had to give up 1.7 billion, right? 1.7 billion plus 2.5 billion is 4.2 billion. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Trump said he needed 5.7 billion or 5.8 billion for the wall. So you're one point, let's say you're 1.5 billion off, a billion and a half off. If you don't think they can't buy hook or buy crook the rest of the money, you're tripping. That's a billion and a half. They're talking about doing a multi-trillion dollar bailout for pensions. Love it. Anyway, in the victory for Trump, the Supreme Court frees up 2.5 billion for the border wall. Construction blocked by a judge earlier this year can now begin. That was the California judge, if I'm not mistaken. Donald Trump has handed a major victory on his signature issue, building a wall on the U.S. Mexico border. On Friday, the U.S. Supreme Court approved the use of $2.5 billion in military funding for the purposes of wall construction. In a 5-4 decision on Friday, the Supreme Court overturned two decisions by a federal judge that had barred the Trump administration from using military money for the wall. The federal judge had ruled the executive branch could not appropriate money for a purpose not specifically authorized by Congress. Wow, big victory on the wall, Trump tweeted in response to the Supreme Court's decision. The money in question comes from the Pentagon's budget. It has been initially approved for military personnel and training purposes. Caveat, real quick. Note that because there's been such an approval, there's going to be an influx of military personnel I'm pretty sure there's going to be an influx of military personnel who go to the different states by the border, so that way military personnel don't miss out on all the money that is going to be spent. Just to throw that out there. The money in question comes from the Pentagon's budget. It had been initially approved for military personnel and training purposes. In two separate cases earlier this year, U.S. District Court Judge Haywood S. Gilliam Jr. of Oakland blocked these funds from being reappropriated and put toward building a border wall. The administration argued that such redistribution of government funds was allowable given the president had declared a national emergency at the border in February. The cases heard by Gilliam were lawsuits brought by the ACLU on behalf of the Sierra Club and Southern Border Committees Coalition, something that became key to the Supreme Court's decision. In its ruling, the Supreme Court found that private groups are not appropriate parties to challenge the allocation of federal dollars. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Clarence Thomas ruled in favor of lifting Gilliam's injunction. Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Elena Kagan, Sonia supported the lower court's decision. Stop right there. You notice how all men voted for and all women, it seems like, voted against. Okay. And then Justice Stephen Breyer supported neither side and promised a compromise instead, supporting the court, suggesting the court clear the administration paths and setting up contracts for construction without allowing to start building anything. Here we go. Stop right there. What he's saying is this right here. He tried to stop it, right, with the compromise. That the compromise didn't work. So this dude really was with the chicks, okay? Can you dig it? All right? Because you're either for or against it. You're not in the middle. And your in the middle movement was to let people go ahead and build up contracts and think they're going to get paid to potentially not get paid. That's stupid. That's hellish. That is ridiculous. If you guys heard that, stage all the gear to get ready just to possibly do nothing. That doesn't even make sense. However, I have to point out real quick that when they say stuff like that, you have to realize two things. Number one is that this is a group of people who, for all sakes and purposes, have never had to really work super duper hard in their lives. The people who may be doing the bidding for the construction have at some point, but the people that we're reading about have never had to do anything. Um, so you need to really understand that for them, the whole private corporation concept, right? And not a, I mean, I can't really think of too many public corporations, but they thought it was inappropriate for a private business and not a and not the public to come forward. You understand? Had the people came forward and said something, then there would have been an issue. Or if a public entity representing the people or in representation of the people and the greater good of the people, right on, were to come forward, then they could have said something. But because this is a private entity, you could argue that they have vetted interest and a whole other course and path that is diametrically opposed to what it is that you're attempting to achieve, which is national security, which is going to be the argument, of course, of the president's lawyers. So I can see easily how one guy's afraid the fence, the three chicks are supposed to be like, we all have a heart, and all the guys are like, fuck all that. Oh, all but one guy. But anyway, let me just go ahead and keep pushing. Litigation over the funding will continue. The case will return to an appeals court. In the meantime, the Trump administration will be able to tap into these funds and begin construction on the wall, reports the New York Times. The ruling followed an emergency filing from the administration at a time when the Supreme Court is typically on summer recess. The filing stated that a decision needed to be reached so that the Trump administration could spend the money it wanted to appropriate before the federal government's fiscal year ends in September. Stop right there. This is what they're saying. Normally, they wouldn't do this because they would take the recess, they would come back, and the new fiscal year would begin. Trump said, fuck all that. Okay, look, we're doing this shit right now. I need the money right now. Listen, all told, the government plans to divert $6.7 billion from federal agencies, including the U.S. Treasury and the Department of Defense, to construct the wall. So Trump's going to take a whole $1 billion more than what he was going to get initially. Oh, gangster. Went in on it. In a statement Friday night, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi criticized the decision. The Supreme Court's decision tonight to allow President Trump to defy the to defy the bipartisan will of Congress and proceed with contracts to spend billions on his wall undermines the Constitution and the law. The court cases were about immigration, the environment, and the Constitution. The construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border has been a signature policy since the earliest days of Donald Trump's presidential campaign, and challenges to the wall's construction have been making their way through various U.S. courts for years. Recent lawsuits argued by the ACLU on behalf of the Sierra Club and Southern Border Communities Coalition have asserted that the wall would irreparably harm the environment and have made the case that the executive branch appropriations for the wall represent a misuse of military funding. Look, this wall is going to do no more irreparable harm than cars are going to do. So unless all these people are willing to start walking for the rest of their lives, shut the fuck up. Anyway, you see what I'm saying? Just a flimsy ass argument. Flimsy as fuck. Who hired these dudes? Who paid these dudes, man? That was a bologna sandwich argument. Oh my goodness. All swine. Something I don't eat. So the bologna sandwich is going to be there when they get back. Oh my goodness. This is horrible. Let me keep it pushing. The second argument moved that the wall debate beyond the second argument moved the wall debate beyond immigration and environmental policy and into the realm of how separation of powers is outlined in the Constitution. So now we're talking about constitutional amendments, and we're talking about separation of powers, and we're talking about, you know what I mean, the pretty much the powers of office. You know what I mean? Within each branch of government. Here we go. Judges were asked to consider whether the executive branch, overseen by the president, can bypass funding decisions made by Congress. Traditionally, Congress has had to approve the appropriation of funds. This role was outlined in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7 of the Constitution, which states no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law, and a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. But when you're talking about a public emergency, national emergency, you can scrap that. Congress has previously allocated, about 1.47 billion in requested funding. Oh my goodness! So Trump's trying to spend $8 billion on the wall. Oh my, gangster, super gangster. The administration requested 6.7 billion. To get around this difference, the Trump administration announced the plans to use other federal funds for the wall, arguing the fact that the president had declared a national emergency allowed for the appropriation of funds. Of course it did. The money at the heart of Friday's Supreme Court decision, which stemmed from the lawsuits brought by the ACLU and Sierra Club, came from the executive branch's reprogramming of funds earmarked for the military. See, if Trump's administration is smart, they're just going to send a bunch of their freaking guys to the border because they've read the Bible and they've seen that the border is going to get overran, and they think if they send a bunch of the military there that they'll circumvent prophecy, but they're not going to. But anyway, keep pushing. I wish people knew how right I was about this whole thing the whole time. I said he might get more than what he asked for. I said he might get less, but I was sure he was going gangster up and get. Anyway, let me stop. I said he was going to do this shit months ago before anybody was, when people were talking about he won't get a fucking dollar. But anyway, in the lower court, federal Judge Gilliam twice found that Trump administration had illegally planned to use misappropriated congressional funds for the purpose of building the wall. He declared a national emergency. How is it illegal? How is it misappropriated? See, these white people all these people, man, be trying to circumvent their own laws, and they get anyway. These black dudes in here, these black chicks, it's too much. It's Suckerville every day. In June, Gilliam ordered that the work be stopped on a stretch of the wall between California and Arizona. Vox's Gabriela Resto Montero reported that the $1.5 billion in financing from that 79-mile portion would have come from the military pay, training accounts through a Department of Defense counter-drug program. In May, Judge Gilliam ruled that a stretch of wall being built between Arizona and Texas likewise could not draw upon reprogram $1 billion in Army personnel funds. Taken together, these two cases block access to $2.5 billion of the $6.7 billion that the Trump administration hoped to appropriate for its border wall. Gilliam rejected the argument that the national emergency allowed for the appropriations and ruled that Congress still had to appropriate and ruled that Congress still had to approve the redirecting of funding. At the time, he wrote that public interest would be best served by respecting the Constitution's assignment of power of the purse to Congress and by deferring to Congress' understanding of the public interest as reflected in its repeated denial of the more funding for border barrier construction. Friday's decision reverses that decision, effectively freeing up a third of Trump's requested border wall funding. The environmental groups that brought those challenges were deemed inappropriate parties to bring a lawsuit about transferring federal funds, an argument put forth by U.S. Solicitor General Noel Francisco. So understand, a person who's probably for sure has immigrant somewhere in their family, Noel Francisco, please, is the one who's leading the charge to get the wall built. So if these dudes don't think the wall's getting built, Consuelo Rodriguez Ramirez Garcia is on the job. Can you dig it? And he's not letting up. Interest in hiking, bird watching, and fishing in designated drug smuggling corridors do not outweigh the harm to public from halting the government's efforts to construct barriers to the staunch flow of illegal narcotics across the southern border, Francisco said. The Supreme Court apparently agreed. The decision is the latest of series of immigration wins for Trump. Trump heralded the decision as a victory. Wow, big victory on the wall. The United States Supreme Court overturns lower court injunction, allows southern border and wall to proceed. Big win for border security and the rule of law. It's one of the several recent wins for his administration's It's one of the several recent wins for his administration's immigration agenda. A deal with Mexico announced in June but reached in March has led to an increased presence of Mexican security forces along the country's border with Guatemala in order to reduce the number of migrants coming from Central America. That agreement came after Trump threatened to impose steep tariffs on Mexican imports that would have damaged the nation's economy. Border crossing also appear to be on the decline. Following Mexico's change to its immigration enforcement and arrest at the borders dropped by 20 following Mexico's changes to its immigration enforcement and arrest at the border dropped by and arrest at the border dropped by 28% in June. Another win came on the same day as the Supreme Court decision. Early on Friday, Trump signed a deal alongside the Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales that will direct Central American migrants seeking asylum in the United States to first apply for asylum in Guatemala instead. The Trump administration has long pursued such a deal with both Guatemala and Mexico. Mexico has made it clear it has no plans to sign such an agreement. Guatemala had refused to sign the deal as well until relenting under economic pressure Friday. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. Whenever somebody relents, gives up. Oh my goodness. Whoo. Anyway, I'm sorry. You almost never see that word used. And when they use it in that term, oh, vicious. Whew. Okay. Okay. The Trump administration has long pursued such a deal with both Guatemala and Mexico. Mexico has made it clear it has no such plans. It has no plans to sign such an agreement. Guatemala had refused to sign the deal as well until relenting under economic pressure Friday. The Trump administration hopes the agreement will curb asylum applications from Honduras and El Salvador, the Central American countries that neighbor Guatemala and countries from which the bulk of asylum seekers at the U.S. border originate. As Vox's Jen Kirby has reported, this policy, with few exceptions, make it extraordinarily difficult for anyone not coming from Mexico or on a plane to be eligible for asylum in the U.S., which is something that I pointed out before. Despite the Supreme Court's decision, court challenges to the U.S.-Mexico border wall remain. The wall was one of Trump's signature campaign issues. He has said it will curb trafficking and illegal immigration at the southern border. Opponents, including congressional Democrats, say the wall is immoral and pricey. Now, y'all need to know this. There have been drug bust after drug bust after drug bust after drug bust after drug bust for big money, big money, big money, big money. The one involving the one a banking company. You see what I'm talking about? These are going to keep happening. Now, do I think that this is all set up? Who knows what it is, but it's happening. Let's go ahead and just keep it reading. Fights over the wall have been ongoing since Trump took office, and Congress has repeatedly declined to provide wall funding. Notably, this resulted in partial government shutdown that began on December of last year and lasted for 35 days. In April, House Democrats said that they would sue the Trump administration over his use of national emergency to try and free up funds. They lost that cause because they lost that case, but have signaled that they plan to file an appeal. And that case isn't the only one that the Trump administration faces. Despite Friday's Supreme Court decision, opponents to the border wall will continue to challenge its construction in the courts. In fact, the ACLU and Sierra Club cases will continue to be litigated in lower courts. We will be asking the federal courts to expedite the ongoing appeal proceeding to halt the irreversible and imminent damage from Trump's border wall. Dor Layden, an attorney with the ACLU, said in a statement, "Our Constitution's separation of powers will permanently be harmed should Trump get away with pillaging military funds for a xenophobic border wall Congress denied." I love this shit. Xenophobic. Listen to these guys. They're so cute. Anyway, woo, this has been classic. I love it. About to shut it down here in about 20 minutes in the Dubsky. But I feel good about it. I mean, I've said everything that there is. When I say this is good and better news, for sure. Uh, whichever one is the good, whichever one is the better. Doesn't matter. The good news for you, black people, black men, until they until they put the clamp down on every black community in America, or all the ones they're going to put the clamp down on, guess what? You can try to go get a job now at a lot of different places. Because if you thought that invisible war that I was talking about is fake, they're snatching up people left and right still, kicking them out still. Why do you think they have that whole process set up? Right. They're you wouldn't set that up. That's not set up so that way you can't get anything done. It's set up so that way you can accomplish it. Oh my goodness. I love it. This was hilarious. I'm sorry if you weren't tickled like I was, you know, you couldn't see the words, so of course you're pissed off. But it is what it is. Maybe I'll send YouTube some feedback and let them know that I want to share my screen when I get done. But outside of that, I think this is much better. I think being able to share the screen may actually affect the actual live stream. So we'll see how they do it all. But um, I love it. This is just as good as anything else. Not like anybody watches and listens to me anyway. But I always am ahead of the curve by many miles, many miles. Just to go ahead and throw this out there, I heard somebody say this week that Pan Africanism died. And when he said it, I could have cried because I was like, wow. I said this years ago that Pan Africanism was garbage and that it was nonsense. And I explained how it was. I gave all the information to the players. Feels good. Even though they come to their own understanding for their own reasons. I still have to say that, I said these things before, and it was easier for people to accept. Um, Sometimes being the hottest thing on the shelf ain't the worst thing for you. But I tell you this, though, I still know more than the average bear, and everything that I have told you today, you can take to the bank. But for sure, they're probably going to send troops to the southern border. Um, like I'm thinking, what's the word? With all the money that they're going to take from the military, it would just make sense that you actually built a lot of the wall with your combat engineers. I'm just saying. They already worked out. They have the combat engineer. There's a couple of these little army engineer corps. You know what I'm saying, that are trying to really get paid. I'm talking about, like dudes who are really army combat engineers. Whether they're National Guard or active duty. Um, I don't think it's going to matter. And then plus you're going to have your freaking civilian guys, but If there's any kind of imminent threat while they're building a wall that becomes known and made known, then obviously the only logical stance to take on that is to have our military personnel there. So you're not. It's like I know they're going to find a way to incorporate military personnel into this money, and they're going to say, well, 1 point whatever $billion only pays for this much worth of training, it pays for this much worth of food, it pays for this much worth of clothing, ammunition, blah blah blah, right, and possible medical expenditures. With all that said, though, it's still worth noting that a person should say that all the things that are going to be, I guess, accounted for would be things that you couldn't go without. You know what I'm saying? Like you're not gonna go without those things. So, so having said that, I really do feel like said I've said the two things that are pretty much on my mind: the good and the better news. You know, everything is always lovely for me. You know, even if things aren't going the way I want them to. But good news or better news, a black man successfully opened a grocery market in a food desert, so it can be done. And I was speaking on this crisis coming like 6, almost 7 months ago, in my corporate Greek videos. So it's just interesting to see how I mean, sure they didn't pick the worst neighborhood. They didn't go to East St. Louis, Illinois, and try to do it, but it's like that's a start, and it's like more places need to have things like that, and it's a challenge because how do you challenge greedy drug dealers? Say, yo, bro, you need to take some of your drug money. Matter of fact, a fine percentage of it, and if you want to wash it legitimately and be able to sleep half-assed at night, you need to open up something like this in your neighborhood. It's not undoable. It's not impossible. It's just I wonder how often people propose that to these guys. I wonder how often they're able to even be put in a position to rub elbows with somebody who has a good enough credentials and standing within society to be able to run into a place and say, I have this much cash equity or I have this much liquidatable equity to open up a business, and this is what I want to do. And to know that he has the physical fiat to be able to pay off whatever the expenses are for a set period of time. Um, I mean, drug dealers are used to fast money, so this would have to be a person who's obviously transitioning out of that life and wants something different, you know. But the blood is still on their hands. But if you wanted to redeem yourself to some level, this is a way of doing it, you know. Um, and people may think it's a petty thing. To me, it's the better news. Um, the wall I already knew was going to get built, so there is no really. It doesn't really get any better. I just cracked up reading what I was reading because it just felt so funny. It felt so good and reassuring to know that I'm not wrong. I said this months ago when I could have easily been wrong. Right now, could easily be hella wrong, but I'm hella right. So it's just one of those things where I can take that in stride. And I hope that other people take it in stride and realize, like, okay, well, maybe this brother isn't somebody that I want to exactly call what he says what I live my life by, but at least I can listen to what he's saying and hold it to the fire because he'll give me something tangible to look at. He'll say, uh, "Here, check this information out and go look at it." Um, one of the most difficult things to ever accomplish and that will ever be accomplished in any man's life, but in any person's life. But I use a man because the the range of difficulty varies uh, depending on the circumstance that he grows up in. and and there is no diminishment to women here. It's just men and women live different existences. So because of that, a man may face hardship that he's expected to eventually overcome, or if not have braved it at first, head on, and then achieved in his first outing or whatever. But the reality is that men are faced with such stringent difficulties, and a lot of the things that men who are black like myself, or you know, Afro men, I call myself black. I'm black. You know, I know that black people go through something that is so different and so profound, but black men go through this. It's like a Rubik's cube, maze, sphere, gelatin ball, quicksand, typhoon. It's so crazy because you just don't know what you're going to get as a black man from the earth. And every once in a while, the sky is blue and the clouds are floating by easily. But I don't want my people to think like that. I don't want them to ever believe that it's going to be easy for us. I want them to know that, like, like we're in a battle for our lives. Uh, it's going to take more people. It doesn't take you opening up a bodega to have produce at your disposal, to have it so that way other people can access it. It doesn't take you using. It doesn't take $1 million. Is what I'm trying to say to do that. You know. Um, Now, of course, this man is trying to get people paid. He's trying to do it the right way. He's trying to use brands that people are used to. He's trying to do a whole bunch of different things that I can't really change. But at the end of the day, I do know that there's a level of decency that he's bringing to that sort of environment. You know, for a place to have had 500 and I want to say, was it 74 or 47 fights, to have had 5 fights in 4 years, where and what he did was he got rid of all the troublemakers, got rid of them. He kept 70%, so that means that 30% of the original 100% had to go. And and not to say that the troublemakers were bad people, but they were the people who obviously made the trouble, or maybe they're people who responded to the trouble and they're the ones who got in trouble. However, his ability to go and to change that sort of setting, I I can relate. I can actually relate as a very young man going into an apartment complex that just by just by mentioning the first couple numbers of the address, the people knew what it was by heart, and they knew where to send the officers. To where within a year of me managing the place, they had a record low number. Where one officer joked around, was like, "You need a key to the city," because the place was that active with police activity all the time. Um, but it's just I can understand that dynamic. I understand how difficult that may be, and and what it takes to actually enact that sort of environment, and to create a place where people can thrive eventually. Now, with that said, um, it is worth noting that that he does happen to be in charge of the largest urban farming complex, right? So he has an ability to to achieve something like this. I'm not gonna say relatively easier, but the degree of difficulty is mitigated just because he has some of the resources that the people already are in demand of. They want fresh produce, and he's already growing the produce, so he only has to import so many different things. Now, when there's more people who are willing to incorporate their time and to use their time for all the other items that people will pay for, right? Then you could obviously create an environment where this person can make money off of it. Like, let's say, for example, there was someone who was really good at growing grapes. I mean, they were excellent at it. That person could take their grapes and sell their grapes all the time. See what I'm saying? There wouldn't be a need to outsource your your uh, your grape resource. You know what I mean? You'd be able to insource that with somebody. But because people sometimes don't have that tenacity and that willingness and that drive to do what it is that makes sense, it it, it doesn't allow them the proper the proper range to do what it is that they're technically doing. Um, I love it. This is one of those little weekly updates. It wasn't meant to pizzazz you or to get your eyeballs all struck up, but it was meant to remind you that things that have been spoke about are coming into fruition, and you should act sooner than later. And even though things are difficult, you should still do what you can do. It's just it's really like that simple. You should just do what you can do. But having said that, I appreciate you. I really do honor and revere your time as a human being. I feel like I've taken up enough of it and squandered enough of your time. So let me go ahead and get back to what it is that I'm doing as a person, and I'll let you get back to your life. I salute you, my friends, brothers and sisters, and may everything that you do, you be well in. I'm out.